Good morning and welcome to WNHH FM's Dateline New Haven. This is Paul Bass inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make the Elm City tick. And nothing ticks better than Pundit Friday, which is about to begin here in the WNHH studio with the #1 pundits in the media universe whose faces you see cut off in half right now on the Facebook screen, but maybe that'll change. You get to see Marquisha's left glass, Norma's back of her head.
Oh.
That might change
That's
as the
not
show
a good
goes on.
sight.
But we're here for radio, right? So we don't
Yeah.
have one of our #1 pundit, Babs Rawls. Ivy isn't here in the studio. She was here this morning. She'll be back next week. But we do have the rest of the gang. We got the flyest news hunter-gatherer this side of Fleet Street, the leader of the Literati Star New Haven independent reporter, Marquisha Ricks.
Happy Friday.
It's high.
We got the Queen of Quippery, quintessence of Compassion Lavosi Hispanic publisher, Norma Rodriguez Reyes.
¿Qué pasa?
And we got somebody else. You know, some people, they know him by a lot of things. Some people know him as the preordained pastor and prophet of paradise.
Oh, Lord.
You know, I've been out on the corner down on Henry Street, or I think it was down
What you
on
doing on the
Whaley.
corner?
Well, people were talking about the DJ of Deliverance. And then I was down in the Cove, and I heard people talking about the filial force of fortuitous fomentation. Then I was up on the 90th floor. Up
Got
on
big
State
vocabularies
Street.
out there.
They're talking about the ouster of obstinance and ostentation and the savior's civility and the hurricane of heavenly homily.
Bermuda.
The conqueror of cannabis commerce and the straight shooter from Bermuda. You know, they were all talking about the same guy.
Unbelievable.
Ooh, I
huh?
still don't know who this person is.
Yeah.
They were talking about Joe Ugly,
Oh,
the
sure.
Joe
Oh,
Ugly show in the
him.
I'm sure.
who was with us this morning. So, you know, I'm going to take a half a second break to ask what's going on with our video here.
I'm with you, because you look kind of greenish, yellowish.
We're struggling. We're struggling.
I don't know, why am I so hot?
I don't know. You having a hot
It's
flash?
your hot flashes, honey.
He's having menopause.
I'm having my menopause. I'm telling you, for some reason, well, you know what it is? I practically ran over you.
Oh.
You know, I wanted to make sure that I was here for you guys. Just putting my little 2 cents. That's all it is.
Okay, so I'm told that the video is going to be fixed. But meanwhile, I was looking at the news this week. It was a really interesting news week. And sometimes the news, you read the stories, and it makes you think of other things besides what's in the headlines about life in general or where our city's going.
Mm-hmm.
There was one story yesterday by Tom Breen that gave me 2 conclusions. The first conclusion was that everybody wants to be like Joe Ugly in New Haven, and that's the future of the city.
They
Can I
want to live in a
explain that?
high-rise apartment?
Yes.
That's what it is.
or live right downtown, not necessarily high rise. So Joe Ugly was one of the first, right? He lives on the 97th floor of the tallest residential
The
apartment
don't
building.
block my view floor.
Yeah.
He's in the tallest building, I believe, residential in the state, a 360 state, which
Largest
really
residential.
was at, excuse me,
It is a large.
and energy efficient too, which is
Yes,
awesome.
it is.
And what's amazing about it is that now everyone's building apartments around there.
Oh,
Or
God,
about
yeah.
to. Across street, a couple. Down the block, a couple. And one of the big ones that we've been waiting 5 years to start was blocked by lawsuit, is now getting it going, is right over the train tracks. Right where Worcester Square connects with New Haven. Finally, they breaking ground on one of 2 big projects that are going to be on one major super block that's right past Fair Street. You go over the train tracks from downtown. You're on Chapel going to, but you're not yet at Olive
Behind
Street.
Firestone.
Right.
Yeah.
So now the first one is 299 market apartments. Market rate apartments. It's
How high are these things going to be?
I think 5 or 6
Okay,
stories.
that's good.
So
Yeah,
Joe
they're
still
not
has-
going up
Okay.
to the 97th floor.
but I mean, I'm talking about so many people still. The market is saying, and by market I mean these projects are filling up, so that
Right.
other developers are getting money to build them, and they're not condos. People don't want condos. Whether it's millennials who have too much college debt or whatever, there's people thinking I'm going to be here 5 years, work at Yale or something. They want to rent, and they all want to be Joe Ugly. They want to be right downtown or right near it, right? So you
Gotta
go
be
Audubon
close
Square.
to
is
Te
gonna-
Amo Tequila.
So I just think that's interesting. That's
It
really
is.
still happening, and they had
Right.
that groundbreaking. The other thing that was interesting to me is, and I thought about this partly because the original great commenter of the New Haven Independent died this week. So the Independent started in 2005, and everyone discovered how fun it could be, both substantive but also interesting, and connect people to our community and news through online commenting. Through this woman named Rebecca Tercio. She was Cedar Hill resident at first because she fought for a Cedar Hill neighborhood. But every story that came up for a lot of years, she would immediately comment and people would wonder, what's she going to say? They say, okay, we heard that there's going to be a new person running for mayor. We heard they're going to be building a building here. They heard that the police are reassigning someone. And what does Cedar Hill resident think? And in those early days, I was thinking, this is so cool about the new media, because I was an old print guy, and the new media is just starting. That in the old days, you had 1 or 2 op-ed writers, William Safire, Carl Rowan. And so you read a story, and a few days later, you get someone weighing in to interpret it. Now, instantly, you had a lot of people commenting right away. And you get a bunch of people who are regulars. And people follow them to see what to think about it. And the other thing about her is, partly comment threads turned ugly, where everybody got, trashed each other. But she was never ugly. She showed the positive promise was that she was passionate. She believed in items, but in her positions, but she always listened to everyone else and liked them. And then she got so proud of being Cedar Hill resident, she actually got some mojo with it. She got cops assigned to her neighborhood. She got crackdowns on slumlords there.
Whoa.
But also really good discussions she would start that she would weigh back in and sometimes have her mind changed about everything in the city, that everyone knew she was Rebecca Tercio. She'd speak publicly, but she kept the name Cedar Hill resident because it meant something. It meant I live in Cedar Hill, and my community matters.
Right.
And she really was an advocate for her community.
And this week we just happened by coincidence, a bunch of our commenters asked if we can have a gathering for commenters. So about 10 people showed up. It was very nice.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
people, liberal, conservative, they all got along. It was really sweet.
That's awesome.
And it showed how this is still going in Rebecca's memory. So when I was reading the story about everyone becoming Joe Ugly on Union Street, what I loved about it is often the commenters notice something we don't notice. And they want to talk about it. And it's cool to talk about it. It's interesting, and no one would have thought to talk about it, which shows the value they bring. So in this case, Samuel T. Ross Lee, who's one of my favorite commenters.
One of my favorite people.
And yeah, me too. And he just wrote about, well, why does this place have an outdoor pool? It gets cold here a lot. And
Who's
I was looking
swimming?
back in the article. I said, did Tom Breen write about the outdoor pool? I actually went through the article a bunch of times and saw nothing
There's
outdoor
nothing about
pool.
a pool in here.
So then I pulled up the new design Tom got, because they've redesigned it. And sure enough, it's not a prominent part of the picture. Samuel T. Ross Lee had zeroed in,
On a
and he
outdoor
just
pool.
looked at this design. He spent time thinking about it,
Right.
and he noticed something that nobody else had brought up, and it started this great discussion about pools.
Wait a minute.
in
My building
development
have a pool.
cities.
These-
I was about
and
to
it's
ask,
outdoor.
does your building have a pool?
And it's
So
outdoor.
Is it
I
up
was
on
wondering if
the
you
very
guys.
It's on
top?
the 6th floor.
Okay, so I was wondering
Well,
if
my
you.
It's
my
over the
building has
garage.
an indoor and an outdoor.
Because you
Ooh.
fancy
Now
on
you
the
live,
coast
she
over
lives in a
there.
condo, and she's by the ocean.
And she's by the ocean,
Yeah,
so she
okay.
got water either way she can slice it.
So here's what I was thinking, folks. Can we take 2 minutes and take turns reading what Samuel T. Ross Lee wrote, and then what other people wrote?
Who's gonna be?
Let's take turns. Why don't we let Joe start as Samuel T.
Hold on
Ross,
one
and then go
second.
round
Hold on.
robin to
Let me
what
get my
people
glasses.
said.
Can you hand me my
No,
glasses?
why should Joe start first? Because he's a male.
Let Norman
No,
start
I was
first.
about to say because Sam T. Ross is his homeboy.
Yeah, I do. Can you hand me my glasses?
Joe's getting his glasses. Let's Norman. You start.
Okay, I
You
normally
start.
read
Hold
right.
on,
Joe's
Okay,
got
here's
a-
what-
I want to read Samuel T. Ross.
Well, you'll get a chance because he comes back.
Oh, he does.
Yeah, okay. So
He
first
comes
is
back.
Samuel Ross. What did he write, Norma Rodriguez, at
Okay.
3:52 p.m. yesterday?
Yes, at
Can I get one of
3:52 p.m., March 14th. Okay. I'll never understand why builders constructing living facilities in cold weather states like Connecticut, in the Northeast, or Detroit, in the Midwest, built outdoor pools. I saw a house online the other day that was selling for over $10 million in Detroit with an outdoor swimming pool. $10 million in Detroit with an outdoor swimming pool. If I want to swim at my residence, I want to do so year-round, not just when the weather is nice. If you're not building the pool inside in a state like this, why bother? Posted by,
Samuel
Samuel
Ross
T.
Lee.
Ross.
So
Yeah.
now Rob N., who's always been one of my favorite commenters in
Yeah.
the Independent from the beginning. Markeisha, what did he write?
Rob N says, STRL. My understanding of these kinds of projects is that their inhabitants all want to perceive access to the amenities, but only a few actually take advantage of them. So the idea of a pool is more important than the pool itself.
And Joe, what did
I feel like you should read it in the voice in your head
Yeah.
Yeah.
if you've never heard their voice.
Yeah.
Well, I've
What
heard
did
Samuel Ross Lee's voice, and his voice sounds like, I guess you're right. Well, whoa.
But you skip Politics 101.
Oh,
Politics
did I?
101 is a very intelligent woman, professor
Oh, Politics
in town.
101.
Yeah, can you go close to the mic, Joe?
Sure, I am on it.
All right.
The pool
What-
thing has always struck me as a little odd, too. But as Tony with kids, it has occurred to me.
She's a townie. She said as a townie
townie.
with
Okay, I'm
kids.
sorry. As a townie with kids, it has occurred to me that my cheapest route to the pool might be subletting an
Oh,
apartment
your
at 360 State Street for a student Maybe this summer.
So what's she saying? 'Cause she lives in Worcester Square. The
She
family.
might call you
And
you get
actually,
a phone call
Wendy,
from
who's running for mayor,
Politics
does that.
101.
Right? Wendy does that.
Yes, she does.
She
She
lives in
rents-
Worcester Square. She rents an apartment and then uses the pool.
She's a rebel though. Like she's like, I do what I want.
But I mean, would you spend thousands of dollars a month just to use the pool?
Well, the
at
pool is
360?
worth it at 360 because you know
But
it's
it's
a
not
heated
indoor
pool.
though. Oh, it's a heat. I thought I was gonna ask.
It's
was
a
it
heated pool, so it goes until like about November or so. So
Then
But-
Westville Man, who always weighs in, he's another one of my favorite. Norma, what did Westville Man write?
Westville.
Oh, Westville Man's usually pretty good.
Okay, this Westville man said, Reverend Ross Lee, years ago, when we lived in suburbia, we used our built-in pool 5 months a year. A little propane, heat, and solar blanket gets you May into October. It was worth it.
Interesting. So,
He
you know,
said it
people
was
have
worth it.
different views about pools. And not only pools as a development tool, which is Samuel Ross Lee and Rob N were talking about, then Westville Man, and now we're going to hear from Gretchen Pritchard in Beaver Hills, all the different neighborhoods, which I love about this. They have different views about how pools play in for just single-family residents and neighbors. So, Markeisha, what did Gretchen Pritchard write?
At STRL, so she's responding to Samuel Ross Lee. By your line of reasoning, there's little point in providing a backyard for houses in cold climates either, since it can't be used for much of the
Now,
year.
that's BS, because in a backyard, you can build a snowman, you can have a snowball fight,
Yeah.
you have a garden that goes on through
Hey,
the
I
whole
was a
Not
kid
in
who
the-
lived
not
in
in the
Missouri.
wintertime.
I don't know why she's
I was a
taking
kid
it.
in Missouri, so I played in our backyard when we lived in
People play
Missouri.
backyards all weather. I mean, I don't know why she
And
said that. About
if you
this.
follow the principle of hygge, which is that you go outside, spend some time out in the really, really cold weather, then you come back and drink mulled wine, and your backyard's perfect for that. So,
But
anyway.
Sammy Rose, but she keeps going.
Yeah, she keeps going. And she
Okay.
says, not everybody imagines athletic workout when they think of a swimming pool. Some of us think of a pool as an intrinsically seasonal outdoor feature similar to a nice lawn or a patio, giving the opportunity to cool off and lounge. And that sounds like an expensive, but
yeah,
I ain't got no
Yeah.
money, so I don't know nothing about that. And
Oh, we don't have
indoor
the cool
pool
off
is a
lounge.
whole different thing. Your idea may well be more widespread among the potential tenants of this development, however.
In other words, she's saying, Sam Ross Lee, I see a reason for it, but you might be right, or Rob N. I think she's really channeling
Mm.
that,
And then
that the
Sam-
tenants like the idea of a pool, like I'm buying into a fancy place because it even has a pool, even if they're never going to go swim there.
True.
Which is kind of interesting. So, Joe, if you look at Samuel T. Ross
So-
Lee comes back, you don't have to reread the quote he quotes from
No,
Sam
go on.
Pritchard's. Okay.
Well, you're all right. I want to get his voice though.
Okay, go ahead. Get his voice. Channel Samuel.
There we go.
Ross Lee.
Channel the Samuel in me. Your idea may well be more widespread among the potential tenants of this apartment, however. My idea, consider potential tenants of this development or any other apartment complex. It has nothing to do with one family living in a house with backyards, which, by the way, can be used during the winter months as well as an outdoor empty, he put question mark in parentheses. Pool is merely a showpiece during the winter months, but one I'm almost certain tenants will be paying for all year.
You know, these are good questions. So do you think maybe some tenants, there's no question, I think he's no question he's right, that some people, it just is a selling point. But they think for other people say it's worth paying all year if I use it
Yeah, of
4
course.
months a year?
Look, there are some things that you use outside certain times of the year only. And then there, like you have, I mean, come on. It's
But
I
it's a
think swimming
seasonal.
pools have a certain cachet, just like
Yeah.
so many of these new places have a swimming pool and they have a bocce court. So they're trying to signal without saying it, they're trying to signal to certain people because they certainly didn't put in a basketball court.
But,
you know-
also, also at the Corsair, you're also selling community. So the Corsair has this New York idea.
Why you
pay
made me
tons-
so angry all of a sudden?
The
Did
Corsair.
I touch your nerve?
No, all of a sudden I want to see it remain flat.
So the Corsair idea is
Like,
that
just plant some
you pay
grass.
tons of
Yeah.
money for a very little apartment, but then there's this all shared space, pool, bocce court, the pizza oven space where you're going to have community.
But again, there's lots of community on the basketball court.
Oh,
would
I agree. I was
argue.
talking about, I was
But
talking about
I think
basketball
they're
court.
signaling to
She's right.
Right.
She's
to
absolutely
people with
right.
a certain amount of money to spend that
Not
this
even a
is
certain
a
amount of money,
nice
just a certain
community.
background. This is
That
this
as well.
community.
But I
is
wasn't
lucky.
addressing your basketball point. I was addressing the
Oh.
point of how this idea like swimming pools or basketball courts, if they use them, bocce courts, are all selling community places where you're going to meet other
And that's
people.
what I'm saying.
And then you could overpay for
what
the
I'm
tiny
saying
space.
to that is
Which people?
basketball builds community.
Right.
You're trying to signal that there's a certain kind of
Community
that's
that you're
welcome
looking for
here.
over here.
Now I know white boys with lots of money play basketball too.
That's right. But not on my backyard. That's what that is.
But
Come on.
they're not gonna go live in a certain place to go play basketball there.
Right.
They're gonna go to the hood to go play basketball, and then they're gonna come home to their nice place with the court.
Swimming pool.
So there you go.
So now 2 people in this room did invest in places that have swimming pools. Norma, you live on City Point at a condo complex. Is the swimming pool have something to do with why you went there? And do you swim ever in it?
You know,
And all your water opportunities.
let
over
me
there.
tell you, I come from the Hill,
Uh-oh.
which at that time was considered the worst neighborhood in the entire city of New Haven that you could live in. It was very drug infested. Okay,
Congress Ave. Everybody talk about Congress
So
Ave.
does where
They
you
used
live
to-
say I made it?
So no, what was happening is when those condos were
Good point,
being
Marquise.
made back
Right.
in the
80s, yeah.
they were the most expensive condos in the entire city of New
Yep.
Haven. Okay, and I remember driving by there, and here I am, this poor girl, you know, with 3 kids, driving by there, and I remember saying to my son, someday
One day I'm gonna live there.
we're gonna be living there.
I made it.
My oldest son said, "Yeah, right, Ma. What are you smoking?"
But no, but in that way, so people who live in a particular place, like it's, you know, it's sort of that cachet. It's not only the cachet of saying this is where if you are whatever type of person we think you are that can afford to live here, like money buys you amenities.
And we'll get more money out of you.
And if you're somebody who says, you know what, I've achieved a certain thing in life, or I'm doing good, I'm making it. You know, when people come visit me, I want to show off where I live at, and it's not necessarily showing off a house that I bought, but this really nice apartment that I live in that, oh, by the way, has a swimming pool.
So now, Norma, you have 2 swimming pools, out and in.
Now
Swimming
I was
pool, the
when
ocean.
when the real estate agent, because it wasn't for me, it was for my business partner that we went to look at that place. The first place they took us to was not to the apartment. They took us to the clubhouse,
Oh.
and it was in
Took you to the
January.
It's an
And you
indoor
look
pool.
out when you see the ocean,
Oh.
the view of
Yeah.
the
It's
Probably
ocean,
crazy.
and then
Nice.
the pool. I didn't even look at the pool. All I saw was
It's
the
like,
view
cool
of the
view.
ocean.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we went and looked at the apartment, and I remember saying, and he says, "No, I don't want a condo. I want a house." I says, "Well, if you don't want it,
You
I
said,
want
I do.
it." That's exactly how it happened. And you know what? I hate living there because
no.
it's getting in there.
Oh,
it's
no.
easier to get into the White House or get into the what's the other place?
The Pentagon.
The Pentagon than it is to get in there.
Why is that,
Okay.
Norma?
Doesn't that just mean you have really great security?
And by the way, I
But-
forgot
But
to
you don't-
remind people you're listening to this on Pundit Friday, WNHH 103.5 FM, live stream New Independent.org. We're Pundit Friday talking about news. So, Norma, you
In the
don't like
summertime.
living there?
In the summertime, it's like living in a resort, a summer resort. It is beautiful. The sight out there, the pool, everything is beautiful.
Oh my God, me want to move.
So, you know, and plus for the fair people, in the summertime, what do? You go tanning.
tanning.
So that's why a lot of people also do it.
So, Norma,
For
do
the
you
tanning
swim?
purposes and also to swim.
Do you swim there? How many times you swim
I'm not a
last
swimmer.
year?
I don't know how to swim.
Oh, okay.
See, that would.
But I like to go there to sunbathe.
But to Marquisha's point, now this is partly racial, right? This is the big thing
Yeah,
Leap
I
has is that
I
black
need to
kids,
go to Leap right now
black
and
kids
take
don't
some lessons.
to get taught how to swim.
Mm-hmm.
and
So
the
as
hill folks
adults,
don't
they-
either.
Even though
if
I
you're
will say
marketing-
I did when I first took swim lessons as like a 15-year-old random. I took swim lessons at someone's house who had a swimming pool at their house. They worked for the Y, but they taught the swimming lessons in their swimming pool. So I think that's also
Norma,
very
why do you
interesting.
hate
Like they had
living-
access to a pool.
You don't like
You
living
don't
there?
like all the security?
I don't like all the security. I lived in a house that, you know what? I never locked my doors. In the hill.
In the
never
hill.
locked our doors.
Yeah.
If anybody want to come over, I said, go get the keys right underneath the rug. And now there, you can't say that to anybody. The security that's in there, it's amazing.
Or that clubhouse you looked at and said, "I want to live here." Do people talk to each other there? Do they see each other?
Do
at
you
your
feel
condo
like
Oh
there's
yeah,
a
no, they
community?
have a serious community there. But you see, I have decided that I don't want to get involved in where I
In the
live.
community.
He's like, I
I'm
don't want to be a
involved
part of that
enough out
community.
here.
Right.
The last thing I want to do is be involved with the issues and everything that goes on
So why
inside.
don't you sell?
Because it's at my old age, since everything is one floor, and
Right.
my old age, that's appropriate for me.
Joe Ugly, so you're
Tw-
360
25
I
State.
don't
years
want to
from
live
now.
in Tower East.
25 years from now.
Joe Ugly, you're 360 State, which does it have an indoor and outdoor?
No, just outdoor.
Now,
Outdoor swim.
when's the last time you went swimming there?
Come on, man. I'm not going swimming. Come on. No.
Did the pool attract you to live there?
No, it probably attracted my wife. I think the
Is
thing
your wife
that
a
really.
swimmer?
Oh, yeah. She's. Oh,
Does she have time to go swimming? Because the other thing,
yeah,
she's
she
a
does.
CEO.
I know, but she goes swimming. That's her thing. She don't go swimming as much as she would love to. I mean, at one point we were living right across the street from the ocean, but what difference does that make? Like you said, beautiful neighborhood, beautiful. Terrible community.
But we're also busy in our
Terrible
lives.
community.
We don't have community life. Like you in Brantford, people go to jobs
I
and
also-
work late.
No,
I think people also like to be like you see all those things and you're like, this is beautiful, this is gorgeous, this is exactly where I want to live. But then so much of your life takes you away from that because you only sleep at your house.
That's
and,
right.
You know, you're not like at your house more than you're not. Like in
Right.
the most time that you're at your house, you're probably asleep. So like you don't like the amenities in your mind are selling points. But if you don't actually get to use them, it's sort of to the point of what somebody said in the comments, which is that you're paying for the proximity to the
And you are.
amenities, but you don't really use them.
But that happens with a lot of things. I
Yeah.
mean, people sometimes they get into an apartment because of like you said, all of the things that they're looking at.
They're like, oh,
But
I
then
can do this.
I
I
can
can
do
use the
that,
gym
but
and
then-
drop my gym membership, but they'll never go to
But
the
then
gym.
I know
or
some people
here.
who live in beautiful apartments in my building. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. They're never there to enjoy it. I would never
Exactly.
do that. You know, I would never do that.
That's
and you
my
know, like
thing.
although living out in that out the other way was pretty part time. I mean, we were most of the time we were living here in the city. This was our permanent out there. You know,
Yeah, it was
we
like
were
your
I'll get
time
away.
away, get
right,
away,
exactly.
yeah.
Because it's generally because my wife's her parents are older. Well, her mom passed away, and she being wrong, but other reasons.
So you see
And-
what Samuel T. Russley started? That's why I love our comment. There's 3/5. Another commenter started a great one. Marquise had a really good story about a woman who was working in an office and people noticed that she would get good meals in mason jars, right? So she made it into a business, right? She's you order and she delivers you mason jars full of a good soup or salad. And have you tasted it?
Nope, I haven't.
Okay.
a
And,
mason jar of salad.
Yep.
That's interesting.
It looked good.
and
Because
you- and
it
you bring
preserves the
beans.
vegetables and whatever and keeps it fresh longer than if you just put it in a typical plastic container.
Wow.
Or
And then at the end of
containers.
the week, you give her the mason jars back.
Back and
sort of
she'll
like
bring
the
you
old
some more.
diaper delivery services.
Or
here.
the milk bottles.
Where is this?
She is based
in the
here
Independent.
in New Haven. She works out of the City Seed Kitchen, but you can contact her. through
And
the
once
link.
again,
That's
something that
interesting. I'm very interested in that.
so one thing that didn't come up in the article, but in the comments, 3/5 wrote a comment. And Norma, would you like to read 3/5's comment there under mason jars?
Yes.
Yeah. There you go.
Which
Down here at the bottom.
Okay.
And it carries over to the next page.
Okay. I wonder, does Carrie Hipster Mason's jars? She will make a lot of money. Hipsters place tremendous amount of importance on the appearances of authenticity and ennui.
Ennui.
Ennui?
Ennui.
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 What does that mean?
That means like sort of being not too emotional about stuff and detached and that kind of stuff.
Okay,
And
okay.
casual.
In a mark of irony that hipsters would appreciate if they were able to recognize it. They work very hard to appear as if they don't care while still marking themselves in ways that announce that they are untouched by capitalism mandates about fashion and entertainment, have superior taste in music, and interact with the world in a way that is somehow truer than the rest of us. The mason jar is one such accessory that announces how much better than you, the hipster,
The hipster is.
his cat is. Carrying around a drink in a mason jar says, I'm better than you because my drink doesn't have a label on it. The hipster wants you to understand that he's superior, but doesn't want to have to say it, rather than holding a mug or a travel cup that
Wow.
wouldn't draw much attention. The hipster chooses the mason jar that looks just out of place enough to call attention to how cool, clever, and savvy the hipster actually is.
So as usual, 3/5 got everybody mad.
Like
He put some of
actually,
it in our
there's
book. So-
kombucha in that
and then
mason jar.
1644 is another one of my favorite commenters. Very different view from 3/5 writes. By your definition, my grandmother was the mother of all hipsters.
Mine too.
As she always canned her garden surplus, a behavior she learned as a prairie farm girl. Now, Marquise, you talked about that and how your grandmother did that too, and she was no hipster. That's isn't part of the hipster ethos that you're taking older, either rural or
But you left out a major part of that right up there.
because that becomes an argument about what the thread should be.
No, it was not. It was about. Well, it could be that, but I see something else. I see. It's against gentrification, vampires.
Yeah, that's part of his thing. He's always saying that everything that happens that attracts hipsters is part of attracting gentrification, like people
Okay,
living in Joe
all right.
Ugly type buildings and things like that, which I don't think is bad. But part of the ethos it's an interesting critique, social critique, but what do you think about that? Having met this woman who does the mason jar business, Marquisha, do you think Three Fists is onto something, or do you think 1644 is right?
I actually
that he's
think
being
that
unfair?
like I think he's being unfair in that like just because somebody is using a mason jar doesn't like necessarily brand them like the person who's doing this just seems like a really regular person. Like she doesn't give me hipster vibes. She's not like rocking grunge, like looking like circa
And if
1990
part of
whatever.
the hipster ethos is, I like the
And I think the people she works with, like that's where the business originated. Like she's a dental assistant in her day job. And so like she works with people who probably look a lot like us at work who, you know, for whatever reason are bad about bringing our own lunches and who are like, oh, I probably should, like that looks dope. Like, how do you do that? Oh, I don't actually want to do that. Will you do it for me? Okay. Like, I think it's more hipster.
But isn't
than
that a hipster? That
Is it?
Is he calling the hipster the person who's making it or the person who wants to have it?
person wants to have it.
That's right. And that's a hipster based on
But
what
I
you
don't
just
think she's
described.
like, I'm just saying she's not going after a hipster crowd in my opinion.
No,
But
it's
you
not.
know, those mason jars, they're not that expensive. Those are
No,
the
it's not
most
about that. It's
not about
economical.
Well, they are.
It's not about.
We use them.
it-
Our whole house is mason jars.
Right.
We reuse them.
Yeah.
For, I bought soup in the other day.
No, it's not
Right,
about the.
so-
It's not about the
But
cost
They're
of hipsters.
economical, so
It's not about the cost of hipsters. It's about the projection, the style. You know what?
Yeah.
I'm
Just
so
like-
different. Like he said, like he said, you could have used a coffee mug, but why a mug? Why not a mason jar? To
Because
drink,
they
you know,
do
because
work
it
for,
stands
but
out
they do
more.
work for reuse and seal. And my argument would be that it's okay if her audience includes hipsters
Absolutely.
and
I'm sure
non-hipsters.
she's not
I don't
gonna
see
turn
nothing
any
wrong
business
with it.
away.
hipsters
I'm just looking
partly-
at what he's highlighting.
Part of I thought it was very interesting what he
Yeah.
highlighted. But partly, if hipsters' attitude, they think they're superior for liking something, doesn't mean it's bad to like it. If they like alternative rock, doesn't mean no one should listen to alternative
Exactly.
rock. Or if it's a good idea that grandma had or people with folk wisdom had to have mason jars reused, and you want to assimilate that and say, therefore, I'm superior, doesn't mean you shouldn't do any businesses that involve mason jars that have a broad
Right.
audience.
And I also think that like not for nothing hipsters get a bad rap, right? Like in the sense like in some ways
they?
they do kind of
They seek
they
it.
do kind of like
They seek-
drive
yes,
and,
they
and
seek that.
and I think true hipsters, people who really want to be like on the edge and like have this kind of thing about whether they're like chasing the latest greatest thing or have discovered something and you're like, you didn't discover something because my grandma been doing
Right.
this, still doing this. My grandmother still cans her preserves
She's
in
the-
mason jars. Like
She's the
that's
original
just
Tom
hipster.
like
Brady.
she's
That's
an
awesome.
OG.
Tom
Like,
Brain found an article this week where there was this some other place had written a study about hipsters and they all look alike and they all wear the same kind of facial hair, and someone sued them for using a stock photo of him as the typical hipster, with the suit saying you did not have permission to use my name to have a negative image of hipsters. It turned out he
won?
wasn't the guy in the photo,
Oh.
and it proved the point of the article.
they
Oh,
mistake
my
his
God.
own self for somebody, so he's sued.
And that's what you're hearing about.
That's funny.
the
No,
cutting-
that is
But you
the
know what? I
ultimate
think
hipster.
hipsters are like the new yuppies. Like they're
Yeah.
like we're
easy to make fun of.
exactly.
Like when I
Right.
met Norma, we went out for lunch and I was a vegetarian. She said, "Is that kind of yuppie thing?" Which means, is this legitimate? Or are you some kind of phony poser?
But I think
That's a good
the
question.
if
I asked her
if
for
you
that.
kind of look into the like, I mean, you can feel how you feel about hipsters, but them like making it like cool again to take your lunch and not spend $1,000 every month on going out to eat, even though
Right.
we're out to eat Chinatown. We want people to spend their money eating out, but like, you know, maybe I got to save my ducats to pay for this expensive apartment so I don't have to buy a car and live in the suburbs and drive to town. Like,
But it-
like it's people also making like particular choices to live a particular way, and people are getting like flack for that because, you know, it also challenges the way other people live because people start to say, well, like, are you trying to say that the way I live is wrong? And hipsters in a lot of ways are saying that sometimes people's lifestyles are
Right.
wrong.
They have privilege they don't acknowledge. And
exactly.
then Three Fists talks about gentrification coming when you're catering to that one group. But I do think it's unfair to just be
Dump on them.
prejudiced against any group. You
That's
know?
true.
but
But
You
Maybe
know,
the
I
root
was-
of it
But
is
you
not to
raised a
act
good point.
superior. They
Yuppie-
shouldn't act superior.
But yuppie,
But should
although
people
it
from
may-
the burbs or people who've had the advantage of living as long as however they've lived and, oh, by the way, owning a brownstone, but we're not going to talk about that. Like, we're not, you know, like they have their privileges too, but they're opining about hipsters on the internet. So,
although
take that
yuppie
for
in
what
its
it's
truest
worth.
sense was what? Young, upward, professional people.
Young urban.
Oh, young
Young
urban.
And it
urban.
became
and
just- I
remember
thought
there
it
were
was
buppies
upward
But by the
because there
time
were
Norma
black
was using it,
urban
it was like anybody
professionals.
liberal who
Mhm.
acts, like
Yeah.
act they're an outsider, but they're really just kind of.
But I remember
cultural
like my
identity.
favorite movie for like ever is like this movie called Baby Boom with Diane Keaton, and like she's got on this like it's from the 80s. She's got on the high power like suit. She's in the corporate world, so she had the big shoulder pads.
Right.
And I don't know if y'all remember the movie, but when she moves to
What
the
was it?
country, this is Baby Boom.
Baby
So she inherits a baby,
Uh-huh.
and she ends up moving to the country in Vermont, and so she starts this baby food company that her old company, after she gets like downsized or whatever, like she basically is fired, and she has hired like trained her replacement, some young dude, and so she is selling this baby food, and like these yuppies come into the store, and they all have a particular look. So I think the hipsters of today are like the children of those yuppies,
Norma.
and they all have a vibe that you can buy from like Forever 21.
When I saw the picture of that jar and what it had in it, it reminded me of when I went to Texas. And
Ooh, hipster central.
they
Oh yes.
Round Rock. I went to
what-
one of the suburbs, a half hour away from Austin.
Ah,
Definitely hipster.
hipster, you are here.
You know,
Yes.
these people, I'm freaking out because they're the family. My son that I'm staying with, they're having entire meals
Mhm.
for 5 delivered to their home
Oh, that's
already
the-
made.
It's the American way.
That is the
I
American
said,
way.
And that's
It's a
literally
shame.
what this
My
lady
God.
is doing.
Right.
You know,
That's what
I'm so
she's
used
doing,
to
though.
cooking for everybody and everything.
Oh, no, nobody has time for that,
Now,
Norma.
You know, these
Nobody has time for that?
millennials, they don't
I
cook
can't
at all.
I can't enjoy my new pool at my high rise
That's right.
my high
If I
rise
gotta
apartment
cook.
that costs me $2,500 a month. I
How
ain't got time
much?
to cook. Man, you know
Norma,
those
when's
apartments
the
gonna
when's
be
the last time you
expensive.
cooked dinner, Norma?
2,500.
sorry?
When's the last time you cooked
Oh,
dinner?
you know it's
I
coming.
cook dinner all the time because
you
I
do?
cook
For what,
for a
a
lot of
That's
one-room?
market
Okay.
rate. Probably for like a studio.
I like to cook for a lot of people, but for me, no, I don't cook.
Well, you get in the home
Well, this
cooking
lady
here,
could deliver you some things in the mason jar.
and we're delivering you the news on Pundit Friday in some kind of jar. Hipster jar. A 103.5 FM live stream to New Haven Independent WNHH. Jane Bandari.
Could I just
Alexander.
interject something? Oh, you were just.
Marquisha Ricks is right. Hipster is just a pejorative for a young person.
I think he's
So
right.
dump on the millennials who have college debt and trying to eke out a fun way of living. But I think there is sometimes, I agree with James, but I think there's also, and it's unfair to brand any group because any group has people
Correct.
who decide
'Cause
their
if-
style choices are superior to
Right.
others and they try to put down people who aren't like them. But that's part of being young too.
That's
or being
right.
Human.
You know,
But it's
The
also
one
apparently
thing
part of being old because all the generations who are mad at the millennials when they should be mad at themselves. I don't.
Right.
I
And the
don't know
old
what
view
to
of
do with
hipsters from
them.
the 40s and 50s meant cool or hip. And so there's always, and cool I always have a problem with because if the definition of cool requires someone else to be uncool.
you think?
And you can't be cool unless somebody and something else is uncool and you're acting
No, I got a
superior
crew
to
of
that.
cool people. That's all. Everyone around me is
I
cool.
feel like,
Okay, so maybe everyone could be cool in
and
their own
also
way.
not for nothing.
Everybody
I
else
don't
is a
look-
hick.
I don't look at people.
So
I was
maybe
about to say,
it's-
not
when
for
people
nothing.
see me,
Black
they're
people
like,
kind of
cool,
own the
yeah.
market on cool. So
When
So
people say
maybe it's
Joe's cool, I don't
celebrating
see
being
it.
who you are and
Right.
different. It's okay, and that could be cool. And it doesn't mean somebody else has to be uncool.
Right? No, not at all.
No,
I don't. I
I don't
never
think
look at
that.
it as that. But you're right, Paul, when you said about groups. You shouldn't be knocking any groups because, for example, yuppies, as I was talking about earlier. Remember the word that was tagged onto that just made that thing so bad. Scum. So I would hate to see
Yuppie
that
scum.
tagged onto like hipsters when people are really just being expressive.
All right.
That's
So
all.
James Bandari Alexander, thank you for
thanks,
But
Jay.
listening
hipster
and
comes
adding
from
to the
being hip,
conversation.
right?
Well,
So what was everybody
Kinda.
thinking about the big national story of the week that had a New Haven angle?
Oh,
Oh.
snap.
Oh my God.
Okay, so there was this bribery.
If I was at an Ivy League school right now and I know how I got in, I'd be like, so how much did your parents pay for you to get into this
So
school?
it turns out
So
that at
true.
Ivy League schools like Yale, people were cheating. They were paying tons of money, sometimes up to $1 million.
Clapback would be
To
strong.
like
$2
bribe
million.
the test
$2 million.
proctors, bribe the coaches to claim you were an athlete when you weren't, so you get in. Bribe the people who proctor the test so someone could cheat and take tests for you or rescore it. And they arrested these people. Well, there were a lot of interesting analyses of this.
There were.
Kalila Brown Dean, who's
I
my
didn't get to read
go-to pundit, it's in the Independent. It's
I
linked.
gotta go read it.
She wrote about how this makes a mockery that there was this idea that meritocracy.
But it's been a mockery, though.
Right, that's what she's saying. It always has.
Since the
And
day
so,
of
like
time.
everyone, and someone else wrote, "Don't you ever dump on affirmative action anymore?" Because the whole argument is affirmative action is that gets the way of the meritocracy. When in fact, these elite
Ain't never
universities,
been
which
no
were the gateway to wealth,
Mississippi.
except that didn't quite work for me. But other people who like go to these schools, that it sort of perpetuates an upper class, and you get in because you're rich, and it was kind of always like that. I mean, well, how did you guys react when you read about this?
On so many levels.
Because your
On
son
so-
goes to
'Cause,
Yale.
oh, you're like,
on so many levels. You know,
I know your
here it
pockets
is.
are on
Yeah.
fire because you're
Well,
like, I
how
pay
much
for
did
an
you pay?
education that he
3.5
earned.
million?
Yeah, I'm like,
He's
I
like, no,
look at my
I'm paying my
wife.
tuition
First thing
every
I did was I
semester.
look at my wife. I said, "We messed up. There was another way. You know,
Like we could have paid up front
we could have paid up front
and then put him on the rowing team.
exactly." And here's the
The
thing.
quote rowing team.
No, here's the thing that,
Oh, but since it was Yale, it was a soccer team.
right.
Unfortunately.
But it's
They
so
have rowing.
nasty.
I know,
Can
but
you
the,
imagine?
Oh,
the
yeah.
one that got caught.
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the-
Can you imagine this for 5 seconds? Your kid is out playing soccer or water polo, and there's someone in the
Is
audience.
a ranked soccer
Hold up,
player. Dang.
right? Someone in the audience taking a picture of your kid
And
because
you-
your kid has the right angle of how to score, how to strike a ball,
That's-
and then take Norma's kid's picture and put it Photoshop your kid out.
Yes.
Are you kidding
The
me?
ones that bother me the most, though,
$2
are the
million
ones
that
who
cost.
got doctor's notes to say
Yeah.
that they were disabled so
Able,
they could
yes.
get extra time, or just bought somebody
Right,
else to
so that
take their
somebody could take the test.
Or
and cheat.
there actually
yeah.
was an affirmative action angle. They fudged what their ethnicities
Ethnicity was.
were. I was like,
Unbelievable.
really?
Yes.
Really? When there are students on campus today who will walk up to a minority student and say, oh, how did you get in here?
Right, exactly.
And say, are you here on
On
scholarship?
scholarship.
Like Joe Ugly's son,
And
who
if I
earned
am,
his
it's
way
still
in.
an
He
academic
earned his way in
scholarship.
every
So
single
how does this
step of the
feel,
way.
given that?
You know, he earned
Like
it.
Mark
It's
Boyce
like,
said.
and now you see something like this, and you're like, for real?
Yeah.
But you know what? This has been going since the beginning of
Don't
time.
make it right.
But
Why
it's too,
bring it
it's,
up now?
No,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
this
no,
You know,
is
that's what
actually,
I'd like
so
to
this
know.
is
Why
this
this-
is
now?
why
this
it's
is
different
what it
now.
is.
All from
This
the
is-
very. That's
No,
how
no.
institutions
No,
were
but there are
built.
two.
No,
there
no,
are two
no,
different
there's
tracks,
two
Norma.
different
There are
tracks.
the people who can buy a building on
Buy a
Yale's
buil-
campus
exactly.
to get in, which Jared Kushner did at Harvard. And this is so I saw a great analysis from the New York Times that I really, really loved. It was like my favorite take on this whole thing.
Mine too.
So the people, so this particular author was like,
Farhad
you know,
Manjoo, best columnist.
he is so good.
Yes, he is.
And so he talked about like these are the people. If you look at the list of people who are caught in this scandal, they're not the uber wealthy.
No.
They're not your Warren like Buffett.
They're not the
they
1%.
don't have that kind
They're
of
in
money.
that 9%
They're
group.
just wealthy. Like they're still wealthy
Yeah.
compared to anybody like
They're-
that we all know. But
Right.
like these are like they're just the single digit millionaire.
His
So they're
point-
trying
yeah.
to buy that
Yeah.
prestige and
Yeah.
and live like the 0.1% as opposed to the 1%.
Right. His point,
And
the
I
one
was
tenth
like,
of 1% already were buying their way
Right.
in, as
that
Norma said.
analysis was
But the
incredible.
yeah, so his point was this was not.
He's
a-
like it was the Uberization, which you talk about the families in the mason jars and not buying their own food, but it's the how can I pay for this problem to go away? My kid's not super bright, he doesn't have great grades, didn't try really hard. I really want him to get to Yale. And you're like, because I know that in order for our family to get to the triple to billionaire status, we all need to be in the room with people who have way more money than we do.
Mhm.
And
That was
Yale and
fascinating, yeah.
Harvard gets us in the door. So it tells you that, you know, not for nothing having those, even if you go, like, this is why people go into massive amounts of debt in education. So my second favorite analysis was a piece from the New Yorker where the author suggests that people should cover this scandal the way a foreign correspondent would, someone who's not familiar with the culture but who understands the concept and who stressed the idea that if you look at the education system as a whole, from kindergarten all the way to this idea of college and the ways in which in an American system you can maneuver to get better for your kids. And we've talked about this in certain forms, which is why do we have a system that's so uneven and unequal and unequitable in the first place?
Because we live in America.
Right. And so his suggestion was cover it like and you'd have to question the morality of the entire system, and you'd have to find that it's an immoral system.
because that's the ticket to
was
wealth and
great.
success, unless you were me.
Oh my goodness! I wish they would do this
But
same
the fact
kind
that
of. This,
the fact that like I went to an HBCU, and because I went to an HBCU, people off top consider my education
What is
less than yours.
HBCU?
Historically Black College
Which
University.
is so wrong.
Which
yeah.
I wish we
And,
had
but
one.
don't take into the account that a lot of minority students who get a college degree in the first place and get it from an HBCU will surely end up at a Yale or Harvard. They can, like it's
Yeah,
possible.
exactly.
We know plenty of people who've
Right,
done it.
right.
But the assumption is your education is inferior.
Right.
There's no way you could ever get into a Yale
But
or
I
Harvard.
thought
I
and
have been
thought
guilty
there
of
was an-
making
I thought
stupid
there was a
jokes
trend
about
among
HBCUs.
talented African American students who correctly conclude they'll get a better education and thrive if they go to an HBCU instead of the Ivy League. Like
I
Ivy
know,
Leagues are overrated. I had a good experience, but it's overrated in terms of how important it is.
And my idea isn't
go
to
to
like
one.
talk about whether one is good or bad or whatever. It's
Yeah.
why do we
Right.
like education is like, think about our own school system now. We have a $30 million deficit we're trying to like deal with. Why is it that we even like education is even arranged in a way that there are winners and losers from the start?
Right.
Like, and you can decide whether you can be a winner based on if you have enough money to move in a particular neighborhood, live in it. Like, people will buy their house based on the reputation of the schools,
Right.
because they know if I leave my kid in what's considered a poor school system, before they do anything, they're already labeled. They're already labeled as, I don't care how good their grades are, they're already labeled. Unless somebody says, oh, well, we'll pick them out. They'll be the exception. They'll be the homeless kid who manages to get into college even though they didn't have a place to live.
So let's
and
say,
so we'll make them the exception, so people will think, oh, well, if you live in a bad neighborhood, there's still a chance that you can succeed. But don't acknowledge the fact that the chance is better that you'll succeed if everybody lived in East Rock.
so let's call out and
Socialism, education, huh?
and I'm going to get to that in a second. But let's get to the St. Martin de Porres School, which used to be on Webster Street in Dixwell, went out of business. It got revived, and it's quietly for 10 years been rebuilding a block in the Hill, and they take care of every kid. It's mostly kids from not wealthy backgrounds, right? And it's largely African-American. It is a really loving and attentive school that has some of those charter school advantages without the metrics and the corporate stuff and the pressure. And they follow these kids for 12 years, and then when they go to college and help them succeed, and they've been doing a great job. So that's a wrap. But I want to say something's going to make you groan. But Babs isn't here. She would have grown the most. So, Babs, you can groan in absentia. If we believe the scandal matters, because often it's not about how good an education you get, which we know is you can get just good education not in an Ivy League school. It's about the upper classes, access to power, and perpetuating the aristocracy. And this scandal, as Norma says, is a twist on something that isn't new. And as Markeisha points out, it's an interesting twist. So Bernie Sanders has been saying for 4 years, make all college free. So that you have a real meritocracy.
Would that make it a real marriage?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking over here. Would it really?
Well, not that it would succeed in making everything meritocracy, because there are other issues that promote the inequality of opportunity.
Right.
But what major, huge step, and some people don't need to go to college to succeed. You want to become a plumber, electrician,
Right.
make plenty of money, be successful, a good citizen. But equal access to education.
But that, here we are in this
I
country.
think
We are
equal access
always
is good, but it's at the
I'm
wrong
feeling the
end.
burn on
I
this.
want equal access at the K through 12 range.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then once we level that out,
then we could
then we can talk about and so that's where free education would work for me, because that would make all schools equal, and then it didn't matter what school you went to. You'd have to figure out how to differentiate your school based on whatever would be the thing. But
the economic structure of that,
from
these
K
schools,
through 12.
the way these schools get a lot of endowments and that type of stuff, this structure works. This structure is king. It's going to be very, very explosively hard to try to break up this structure.
Oh, yeah, because people who are invested with their own dollars in what it looks like now.
Right.
When I went to Yale in 1978, that's what struck me amazing. I did have some very good educational opportunities.
But you've always said that they're a take over the world kind of
It,
school.
from day one, I realized what this is about is teaching you
It's a
how to
training
run
ground
other
around the
things and be
world.
the boss and be the aristocracy.
And look how many people go from Yale to working in the White House or some major corporation.
Or
and I'm not
leading
saying that's
in leadership
a bad
positions,
thing,
right.
but
What
it
you're
does
saying.
keep that it's a bad thing in that it keeps a sieve of of a small group of people with access to power and a cultural class of
And
these
then-
gentry
King
landowners
and
who control the
breeds-
world.
That's what breeds this situation.
And this is
right
why
now.
they're so mad at
So
AOC.
Kingman Brewster, when he was the president of Yale, decided, I want to keep this as the best and the brightest place, but really make it a meritocracy and not just for rich kids from the alumni. So that's why he opened the doors to African Americans and women and more scholarship. And so there is more opportunity to get in, but it still perpetuates an upper class, and there still, as the scandal shows,
And these schools
plenty-
are still pretty predominantly what they were
yes.
prior to that.
And
But
that's
this thing has
that's
a
true.
strong race connection
Oh,
to
absolutely.
it. You know how this thing how it blew up, right? You know the backstory on this?
I just saw a story that said some guy who was about to be indicted for security fraud.
Right, he was indicted for
Turned.
Wore
He
a
was like,
wire
But no, before
Oh,
that,
he is dead to
with the
everybody.
Yale,
No,
I'm
Yale
sure.
coach.
before that, he was. You got to remember, he was working with this guy King in the first place. And there were other people that he was working on. But who's the first person he threw under the bus?
Black guy.
Yeah.
That black
Americans.
coach, boy.
Yeah.
He was like, "Oh, I got someone. This is bigger than Nino Brown." Yeah.
Whoa.
And then Paul Manafort, who's white, who had a career of worldwide.
And they're going to throw the book at this black man.
Right.
The
And
first-
Paul Manafort going to be home.
So first there
eating
was a
lobster.
Republican judge who said, "I feel so sorry for about Paul Manafort. You've had an exemplary life, which he has spent decades and decades breaking laws
What?
and cheating and working with foreign governments." And they sentenced him to less. Someone wrote in that a public defender was offered for an African American man who stole
Stole
$100 of
$100
quarters
coins.
from a
Or
from a
look, we could
laundromat.
probably look at the women who've gone to prison for like using their relatives' address to
Address,
send
right.
their kids to school have probably gotten more time
3
than Paul
years.
Manafort. So-
No, but they got time when you look
And they
equivalent to
But
what
you
he
know
did.
what you
served their
just mentioned
time. It
right
wasn't
now, what
house
you guys
arrest,
are
it
just
wasn't
mentioning
suspended
right now
sentence, none of that.
goes to show that this type of investigation should also occur in the justice system, because the justice system is really, really unfair to the minorities.
Of course.
Of course.
Very,
Of course.
very unfair. How come nobody's
Absolutely.
breaking that?
That's
I am
because
sure- I-
all
I-
the,
I
a
hope
lot
that
of the
the day
judges
comes
went to the same school.
when
Right,
when they're
exactly.
able to talk about the just the
The
difference.
criminal and justice system,
Yes.
highlighted in books
absolutely.
by people like
Because
James
that
Foreman
other
Jr.
piece
and
from the
Michelle
New York Times
Alexander.
had a great line where he was like, where the prosecutor said something like, there will not be two like systems for higher education. There won't be two criminal justice systems. The guy was like, if he was a meme, he'd be that meme where the dude is doing the sign like, quit playing, sir.
Okay,
you know
so
it's already two
today on
distinctly
Pundits-
But
different
this
criminal
guy
justice
literally
systems.
sat back.
One for wealthy and one for not.
This guy literally sat back and was telling parents, "So far, you have not done anything illegal. You can walk away now." He was trying to get
He's
some.
like, look.
He was trying to get some people to walk away, but however, boy, he was like,
Like, but if you're going to run me that
if you-
check.
no, but he was literally pushing them back, telling them after he was already wearing a wire. He was pushing them away. Keep in mind, he's got this black coach over here. I got you. Don't worry. He didn't even
And
tell him
think
about King.
this. I wouldn't be surprised if
It
the
was not-
coaches and the test proctors, if they all end up doing actual time.
Okay,
But
that's what I
everybody
want
else
to
is
see.
going to the house.
That's what I
really
wanna
would be
see.
Yeah,
very
but what's
Who's
going to
gonna go to
happen with
jail
the
and who's not?
students? What's going to happen
I
with the
hope they get
students
kicked
that
out of
took
school. 'Cause
advantage?
I absolutely don't
of
believe
this
You
whole
know you
process.
couldn't
I
play
don't
polo
believe this
pony.
narrative that these kids didn't
Didn't
know
know
what their parents
They
were
ain't
doing.
know-
I don't believe
if
that.
you know you don't play polo pony and you got a polo pony,
No, but
the
I think
scholarship,
sometimes
you
some
know
of
you
the
don't
kids
play
may not be
soccer.
aware
I
of
don't
that.
believe
You
it.
don't
And-
play
Because
soccer.
you know, kids
I
at that
don't believe
age,
it.
But you don't play
many
soccer.
kids at that age are very righteous.
But you don't
They're
play.
not going to allow their
I don't believe
parents
that.
to
But
do
you
that
don't
kind of
play
stuff.
soccer.
I don't
So
believe
how
So
it.
do
I
you
believe
show
a
up?
lot of those parents did not tell those kids.
I don't know
What?
anybody to
Norma,
turn down a
Norma,
scholarship
if
or a
you-
trip
really,
to any school. I don't
If
believe
you
it.
don't
I don't
play
believe it at
soccer,
all.
how come you taking the scholarship?
And my thing is this.
Nobody's got a point. How could you take the scholarship?
Well, maybe
Also
that's an
this.
exception.
Also this.
it's a whole
also
bunch of
this.
coaches.
Also this though. I resent very much the narrative though, because I feel like the mainstream media is complicit. I feel like Harry will love this. That the mainstream media is complicit in the innocence of these children, and it's very much along
Yes.
the lines of we can't ruin their
Their
lives
lives.
over something their parents did.
But
And
if
I'm
their
like,
parents are all
nope,
black,
we ruin people's lives
All
all
the
the
time.
time.
But look,
And
it's
we
the
do
same
it in the
thing with
press.
the immigrants that are coming over here.
And we do
they
it in
don't
the press.
They don't want to blame the kids for the parents having brought them here.
But
Well,
you're
they can't.
a child.
You know?
You're
They
can't
six
on that stage.
And
Well,
you're a
No,
child.
no.
Kids that are 17,
This-
18
they
years
can't
old.
run. They can't
Their
run
brain
back
is
to
not
the-
developed yet.
But they-
Remember, the
but
brain
they
doesn't
can't-
develop till you're 23, 25 years old.
That still doesn't
Okay,
mean they can't be put
your
out of
brain
school
don't
and they can
tell
apply
you, Mom-
legitimately. And if they get in, they get in.
Right.
If they don't,
Okay.
they don't.
So
Mom,
we
Dad, I
solved-
can't do this. I'm not
we
going to
so-
school
we
here. I'm
solved-
going to
And
the
even if you're
army.
not going to do that, you still should get kicked out of school.
Right.
If you want to apply, you can apply
Right.
and see if you get in.
Okay, at the
If you don't,
risk of
there you
ending
go.
not on this wonderful high point, we have solved today on Pundit Friday. Thank you for joining us. Corruption in higher education, racism in the justice system, swimming pool, and hipsterism. My last question is, before we leave, and thank you for joining us,
they're like, what was that last part?
the mystery this week raised by a story by Thomas Breen that had been previously covered by Markeisha Ricks. They're fixing up an old clack factory, block-long clack factory on Hamilton Street. Who knows what used to happen there? Markeisha had a story about some of the wild
so many
stuff.
great and terrible things.
They're
there.
doing environmental cleanup, and voila, hidden under the floorboards are a whole cache of weapons, including an AK-47 and a Mac 11, which I didn't really know what it was, but it's like a Uzi.
Yeah.
Why were they there?
It's a great place to hide stuff.
Really?
Like
Who
it's
was hiding
abandoned.
and why?
But
Probably
people
some
think,
criminal.
but people think that is some modern day. I guarantee you look back. That's probably been there since the 70s. That's probably some.
It's probably old.
Come on, that's some old hitman. That looked like a hitman stash.
But that
And
place
that would
had
be a great
also been
hitman
rented.
location.
Wasn't some of that area also rented to other different types of
Yes.
clubs?
Yeah,
so
strip
maybe
joint.
whoever owned it, you know.
No,
Okay,
not
so-
in the
Find
club.
it as a
Not
good-
in that building. That building was not rented to clubs, was it?
Yeah, right next door
Yeah.
to it.
It was next door to it.
But it was in that complex.
yeah.
You had
But
access
it
to
looked
it.
that
like a
club's-
hitman.
like, it's been
that
all
looked like a
kinds of,
hitman
like-
job to me. I'm like, I saw the Godfather.
Some mobster.
No,
All right.
we were all going to apply to Babs and Harry's mob school. They were talking about it this morning.
All right.
So it was their
On
guns is what you're
103.5
saying.
FM.
Okay, so if you're going to have to just return to join us on Pundit Friday next week to continue plumbing the mysteries of New Haven, some but not all of which we solved today with the best media pundits in the universe. We're talking about Marquisha Ricks, Norma Rodriguez Reyes, and Mr. Joe Ugly. We miss
Who
you,
is hot
Babs.
for
and if we-
some reason? I am just burning up.
well, a lot to be
Might have
burned
a
up
fever.
about.
Do you?
Go
You
go
might.
jump in your pool.
I hope.
We can end on that note.
No, he
right
just
there.
pays to be in a place with a pool. He doesn't actually swim.
I don't. I'm from the Caribbean. You don't go in no pool. We don't even go in the ocean because we know what's in there. Sharks.
So
As well as might have been
I
at the
went
Clark
snorkeling
Square.
with a Jamaican man, and he swam just fine.
He swam fine.
We're going to take it
dad
out
was
with the
very much a
Afro-Semitic
Olympic
swimmer.
experience,
Anything with a
performing I
woman
Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all weekend long at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.